So back in the 1950s, there was a rhetorician named Donald Bryant, and he had this nice definition of rhetoric. It seems like our industry is about defining what we do. But anyways, he said that rhetoric is the art of adapting ideas to people and people to ideas. I really like that. I like that thinking. Part of my job is helping people and ideas come together. I think that's great. But if we're going to do that, you need to have a pretty accurate sense for what that audience knows about the topic. Not only what they know about the topic, but what they don't know about the topic. And not only that, but what they think they know about the topic, but in fact are wrong. And this video will discuss how to gauge an audience's topic knowledge. And figuring this out, what the audience actually knows, can be pretty tough. And for many of us, our first reaction is to simply jump into the speech and start writing. You know, it's like, I know what I know, I just got to explain it. But in this sense, your expertise can actually be kind of a hindrance. It can serve as a set of blinders, preventing you from seeing the topic as your audience does. Because remember, the speech isn't just for you, it's for the audience. So I think a good first step is to kind of take a step away back from your content and assess the entire terrain. And what we want to identify is where the knowledge gaps are. So what do I know that they don't? And it might be a big difference, it might be a small one, but we got to know what it is. So here's some questions you can ask when you start working on a speech. So first off, do we have common definitions? So I would say good sharing of information really starts with common definitions. Are we talking about the same thing in the same way? So for example, there was a debate a while back here in Seattle about a new city council bill calling for tougher penalties on aggressive panhandling. Now, some people were for it, some were opposed to it, but key to the public education on the bill would actually require defining what aggressive panhandling meant, because it didn't simply mean all panhandling. It was actually a very specific definition that applied to only a handful of cases. And being able to explain that was fundamental to understanding the proposed bill. And so any public information that wasn't talking about that key definition just wasn't doing its job. So you want to start by asking this key question. Are there important definitions that the audience just doesn't know? Okay. Another thing to ask is what's new, what's similar, what's different. So in many cases, our job is simply to present new information. So if you're a tech person talking about an updated product, highlighting similarities and differences seems to be pretty key to what you're doing. So you have to discuss the similarities so people can see the continuity between your products, but you also want to magnify the differences in order to justify a purchase. As a salesperson, you might automatically, innately know the similarities and differences, but you need to look at the topic through the eyes of someone who doesn't have your expert knowledge. So here you can ask the question, how recent is my audience's knowledge? Okay, maybe skills are more the issue here. So then we ask, does this audience understand a key process? So if you're training new employees on a task, then the steps in that task are probably also going to be your key points. So for example, Seattle has lots of coffee shops, kind of one of the things we're known for. And training new baristas, the people who work in the coffee shops, training the new baristas is kind of like an industry in and of itself. And most training requires going through the steps in taking the order, pulling the shot, mixing the drink, and serving it up. Now, new baristas probably know that process, right? They've bought coffee themselves. But as you're thinking about explaining that process, it's very useful to lay out each and every step and then ask, does this audience understand each and every stage of this process? So these questions are more when the audience just doesn't know something, right? If they don't know the process or they don't know the new changes. But maybe instead of a lack of knowledge, your audience has an abundance of bad knowledge. Then you got to ask, is there something that this audience actively doesn't believe? Now, tackling this can be pretty tricky, but it usually needs to happen head on. Nevertheless, it's important to sort out what types of incorrect assumptions you need to dismantle in order to clearly convey that information. So those are some specific questions. But a safe approach, perhaps the most comprehensive approach, is simply to look at 5 W's and an H. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Right? These are the key questions that beginning reporters are taught to ask in each and every situation. So if a journalist wants to understand an issue clearly enough in order to inform others, they start with 5 W's and an H. So a few years ago, Washington State, where I live, where Seattle is, where I'm right now, legalized recreational marijuana. So the second we did that, the state had an informative communication challenge. How were they going to quickly and clearly explain this new law to millions of people? And the 5 W's and an H get to most of the important issues in that topic. So who? Big question, who can legally buy marijuana? Well, it's not everyone, right? The law is similar to our alcohol laws. So we're only talking about people 21 and over. What? What can they buy? So in other words, what's for sale? Does it include edibles, what are called edibles, marijuana brownies? Well, it didn't initially, right? When? When is the law going into effect? Boy, that's a big one, isn't it? It's not like the bill passed, pass the bong, woo, right? There was a period where you had to phase in the bill, so you got to know when it kicks in. Where? Where is it legal? Can you buy it in every city in the state? And then once you've bought it, where is it legal to smoke? Why? Why was this happening? So in our case, in Washington's case, it was a statewide initiative. So the voters, not our legislature, not the elected officials, the voters directly made this legal. And then we get to how. How was a big one, okay? One of the big questions leading up to the vote was, and this affected what happened after the bill was passed, was how will the tax money be used? That's a big question. So it'll go to social and health services, it goes to the state budget, it goes to marijuana research. So these questions hit most of the key points an audience would need to know in that case. So if you want to gauge your audience's background on a topic, I really think it's a good idea to start with those 5 W's and an H. So by way of conclusion, it's important to sort of reflect on why we're doing this. Well, once we have an idea of our audience, who's going to be there, we got to figure out what we know that they don't. And this might be easy. Nevertheless, it still bears investigation. You want to double check your knowledge on that, because finding these gaps and resolving them are at the heart of good public speaking. Now, how do you actually go about finding this information? Well, it varies, right? Some of it you just may know. You might be able to ask an audience member directly. Okay, that's a reliable method. But otherwise, it's usually a matter of kind of educated guessing. And sorting through these questions, hopefully, can give you a better picture of what that actual audience will be like.